Good day everyone. We are the group 6 and today we're gonna talk about chemiosmosis. It is the movement of ions, specifically hydrogen ions, H plus or protons, across a selectively permeable membrane down their electrochemical gradient. This process is central to how cells produce ATP, the main energy currency of life. Ang chemiosmosis process is mahitabo both sa mitochondria and chloroplast. Ginatawag sa na cellular respiration sa mitochondria and photosynthesis sa chloroplast. Mag-help siya mag-convert ng energy stored in nutrients or sunlight into something usable para sa cell. Chemiosmosis is ang process para maghimo ng energy or ATP by using the movement of tiny particles called protons. So basically, ang chemiosmosis sa process maghimo ng energy para ang cells is magwork.
Where does chemiosmosis takes place? So chemiosmosis is a universal biological process that occurs in both cellular respiration and photosynthesis. This process involves the movement of ions across the membrane, creating an energy required for ATP synthesis. It is an essential step for cellular life in all living organisms. So, chemiosmosis in mitochondria or cellular respiration happens during oxidative phosphorylation in the electron transport chain or ETC. Here, the energy from the sunlight helps to transport protons across the brain, which are then used by ATP synthase to generate ATP, directly fueling the Calvin cycle and various biosynthetic processes in plants. Chemiosmosis in chloroplast or photosynthesis. It happens during light-dependent reactions. Photosynthesis chemiosmosis happens specifically across the thylakoid membrane. So, when the light energy excites the electrons that pass through an electron transport chain or ETC, it then pumps the hydrogen ions or the protons into the thylakoid space. It creates then or creating a proton gradient. This potential energy drives protons back through the ATP synthase, an enzyme that synthesizes ATP from ADP, and inorganic phosphate. The ATP that produced here is then used in the Calvin cycle or the light-independent reaction for sugar synthesis. So chemiosmosis also happen in prokaryotes, but in prokaryotes it happens in the plasma membranes. It generates the ATP using a proton gradient created by the electron transport chains located in their cell membrane. Photosynthetic bacteria use light energy to drive this process. It's called the photophosphorylation, while non-photosynthetic bacteria use energy from organic compound oxidation to create proton gradient that powers ATP synthase. So, chemiosmosis and photosynthesis involves the using of the proton gradient formed by the light-driven electron transport to make ATP in chloroplast.
Electron transport chain, or ETC, generates a proton gradient. So, as electron moves through protein complex in the membrane, energy is released. So, while daw nagadaloy or nagaagi ang electron through protein complex, is naga-release siya og energy. So, this energy is used to pump protons or hydrogen gas across the membrane. Result: a proton gradient or high hydrogen positive on one side, low hydrogen positive on the other. These create two forces combined as the proton motive force or PMF. The two forces is concentration gradient and electrical gradient. So a concentration gradient drives the movement of a substance from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, while ang electrical gradient drives the movement of a change substance from area of similar change to an area of opposite change. Next is proton flow back through ATP synthase. So it shows on how protons flow back through ATP synthase in mitochondria to make ATP or energy. The electron transport chains create a high concentration of protons in the intermembrane space. ATP synthase acts like a channel, allowing protons to flow back into the mitochondrial matrix, and this flow drives the production of ATP. So proton cannot freely the lipid bilayer, so they return via ATP synthase, a protein channel. As they flow, ATP synthase spins like a molecular turbine. So proton can't pass through the cell membrane directly. They need protein channel called ATP synthase. As proton flow through ATP synthase, it spins like a turbine generating energy or ATP. Next is ATP is generates. This show on how ATP is generates in the mitochondria. Protons flow through ATP synthase, which act like a turbine, converting ADP into ATP, the cell energy currency. The energy of protons flow drives the phosphorylation of ADP plus Pi to ATP. So the energy released as protons flow through ATP synthase is used to add a phosphate group or Pi to ADP, creating ATP. This process is called phosphorylation.
Chemiosmosis and mitochondria respiration. Chemiosmosis in mitochondria is a key process in cellular respiration that links the breakdown of glucose and other fuels to the production of ATP, the cell energy currency. First, ATC complex 1 to 3 and 4 pumps protons into intermembrane space. So this complex uses the energy from electron to push H plus ions into the intermembrane space. Second, creates a proton gradient across the inner mitochondrial membrane. More like H plus outside than inside makes a gradient like stored energy. Proton returns to the matrix via ATP synthase. ATP is made. So this means like H plus flow back through ATP synthase, which produce ATP. 4. Oxygen is the final electron acceptor, forms water. This like oxygen captures electron and H plus making water at the end. Yield about 34 ATP molecules per glucose from oxidative phosphorylation. So during the respiration, most ATP is made in the final stage called oxidative phosphorylation, which uses the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis from one glucose molecule. This stage produces about 34 ATP, making it the main source of the cell energy.
Light excites electrons in photosystem 1. The electrons travel down ETC. Protons are pumped into thylakoid lumen. High protons concentration inside lumen flow back to stroma via ATP synthase. Kung ang light mo ay gusto sa photosystem 1, ma-energize ang electrons, tapos ang electrons kay mo-move sa chain na mag-pumps ng protons inside sa thylakoid. Tungod sa kadamo ng protons, magawa sila balik, tapos muagi sila sa ATP synthase, which makes ATP. Ang electron sub kay maka-help siya pag-form ng NADPH. Both ang ATP ug NADPH kay gamiton sa Calvin cycle para makahimo ng sugar para sa plant. Proton motive force. Proton motive force kay ga-combine siya ng pH gradient ug membrane potential. Ang pH gradient kay mas damo ng protons sa suod ng thylakoid lumen than in stroma. Tapos ang membrane potential kay gigamit ang energy para ma-pump ang protons sa sulod ng thylakoid. Ang pressure kay mo tuod siya mo push siya ng protons through ATP synthase, which uses their flow para makahimo ng ATP para sa Calvin cycle. Importance of chemiosmosis, central to energy metabolism in all life forms. Explain how energy from food or sunlight converted into ATP, basis of aerobic respiration and photosynthesis. Supports an endosymbiotic theory, mitochondria and chloroplast involved from bacteria. Chemiosmosis kay ang process where cells kay gahimo ng ATP, ang energy na kailangan para mabuhi, gigamit siya sa tanang living things, matao man, hayop, halaman o bacteria. Sa ini na process move ang proton sa sulod ng mitochondria o chloroplast. ATP is formed. Ini ang core process ng respiration o photosynthesis. Chemiosmosis kay ka-support sab siya ng endosymbiotic theory, which is ka-state ng ang mitochondria kuno o ang chloroplast kay gikan sa bacteria. Key points to remember: powered by electron transport, respiration, photosynthesis. Proposed by Peter Mitchell, chemiosmotic hypothesis. Chemiosmosis is powered by electron transport chain, ETC. Ini na process na gigamit sa respiration ng animals o photosynthesis ng plants para maghinang ng energy. Proposed by Peter Mitchell. Siya ang ga-introduce ng idea called chemiosmotic hypothesis, which explains na ang protons kay move sa membrane para mo-produce ng ATP. In simple words kay chemiosmosis kay ang modan ka charge ng battery. Ang battery kay ang proton gradient, kibali ang protons kay gatibo sa isa ka side ng membrane. Pag nag-charge na, gamiton ng cells ang yatibo na energy to power the machine. Nagitawag na ATP synthase, ang energy ng life na need ng tanan living things para mabuhi.